And happy Sunday night here at Unlock the Middle. Unlock the Middle is a show about bringing people together from across the country and talking about educational topics that just make us a little bit better. My name is Dean Packard, and I am the proud principal of Charlton Middle School in Charlton, Massachusetts. And we've got a great cast tonight. And I'm not bypassing my guy, Josh, tonight. He's right next to me over here on the side. But I'll tell you what, before I hand it over to him, I'm going to say this. Whether you're in Alaska or Hawaii, whether you're in Maine or Florida, you want to make sure you retweet and share this out because the nuggets that we provide here can just make us all a little bit better. Josh Tovar, great to see you. We got a great cast with us tonight.
Awesome. Yes, thank you, Dean. Just about Principal of Memorial Pathway Academy in Garland ISD, Garland, USA. Ready to rock and roll on this Mother's Day special edition. You know what? We normally have a different format for this. There's going to be more of a loving aspect to today's show. So before anything else, before we get started, just your name and where you're located. That's all, okay? Just your name and location. Juanita.
Juanita Quiñones Cándara from El Paso, Texas.
Jennifer.
Jennifer DeGraff from El Paso, Texas.
Margarita.
Margarito Tovar. I am in Breckenridge, Colorado.
Brandarius.
I'm Brandarius Johnson. I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada.
And Dean Packard is located in
Charlton, Massachusetts, Dudley, Massachusetts, a little small town in the central part of Massachusetts along the Connecticut border.
Awesome. All right, so Mother's Day special shout out to all the mamas out there, todas las mamacitas on 10 de Mayo who had your special day at a different time, but today we honor you. So we're going to get started with a couple of questions going back and forth. Starting off up there with that guy in Massachusetts, Dean Packard. Tell the audience a little bit about your mom and what makes her so special.
Oh, man, Mother's Day is a special day, and I apologize for not leading out of the gate with that, Josh. I'm glad you clarified exactly the reason for tonight's show. Moms are important. They set the stage for the development of children and growth, and they provide a pathway through nurturing and just opportunities to connect. And, I'm very blessed. I had parents that allowed me to really take chances with things in life and really become the person that I am today. They supported me all the way through high school and led me on a path to college. And basically said, what you put into this world is what you get out of it. And, they've always backed me up. I'm far from perfect, but I know that mother and my father, both together, they led the path and they helped me understand when I made mistakes. And for me, that's what life is all about because I've taken that with me through education. And we realize we work with kids and they make mistakes all the time. And it's not the end of the world when you're growing cognitively, physically. You want those champions in your corner that say, you know what, tomorrow the sun will be shining. And I've been blessed, and that's how it's kind of been for me throughout my path.
Now, thank you for that political answer, Dean Packard. What makes your mom so special?
Again, moms are moms, and you think about it, there are stages in life, and, you think back, and I think what makes her special is the fact of providing the nest growing up, and that nest was an important thing. And, obviously I've been able to break away, married now and off and doing my thing. And I have my own family. And I just remember the opportunities that she's provided for me to grow as a person and as a man. So it's all good stuff. And those are things you never forget.
Brandarius?
Yes, sir. First and foremost, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. And thanks again for the opportunity to connect with individuals like yourself. I thought this morning to myself, just in a message to my mother saying thank you. I think one of the most important things my mother did to me was always tell me, son, you make your bed, you lay in it. And by that, she said, she meant to always be accountable for your actions. Whatever you choose to do, it's you that has to accept what comes with it. And, just raised me to know that all of my highs and achievements go to God and my low points, I'm accountable for it. So that's kind of, how I sum up my mom, the hardest working individual I know. And, whether hell or high water, my mom was right there with me. So that's kind of how I describe my mother. And, like Mr. Pickard said, she made me the person that I am today.
Wow.
Juanita?
Oh, my goodness. All right, Josh, we're not supposed to cry during this, right? The reason why I say that is because this morning I woke up and, on Facebook, there's always pictures that come up. And my mom passed away 3 years ago. And just to answer it in a nutshell, she was always my number one cheerleader in everything that I did. And she always told me, mijita, querer es poder, which means as long as you really want it, you can do it. And also she inspired in all our, siblings and my siblings about the importance of going to college. I was born in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, so her dream and my dad's dream was to come to the United States. And so they always believed in us, and they always said that that we could do anything we wanted to. And so I believed her, and I did.
Jennifer.
Well, thank you guys so much. I think about a lot of the ways that moms in general, but if I tell you specifically about my mom, I think a lot of times it can be emotional for me. Thank the good Lord, my mom is still here with us. She's a retired registered nurse, but as I grew up, I really felt like she eliminated a lot of the non-communicative side. She was such a listening ear. She, no matter what I told her, she didn't have like that shocking response. Even if it was a little shocking, she was always very like neutral, and she would listen to me even when there were things that I maybe didn't want to tell her. I felt so open in the communication, and now that she's a retired RN, I tell her all the time, I'm like, Mom, I need some advice, and it doesn't matter how old I am. And at 45, I've been through a lot on the roller coaster with a lot of people, I think, in general. We go through these roller coasters in our lives, and we might not. I think a lot of times people say, well, that's not my mom, that's my stepmom. But honestly, it's not about that anymore. It's about those that are feeling that mom feeling. And so for my mom, who's out there still, I just left her house. And so it was an amazing way, because we take a lot of time sometimes for granted. And so that's one thing I love about my mom. She taught me to live in the now, and I will every day.
Amen.
Margarita.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm sorry for all of the people that experienced today with pain. For those people that couldn't have kids or maybe are grieving the loss of a baby or the loss of their mom, like Juanita, I'm sorry. And thankfully, I still have the ability to call my mom and talk to her. My mom came from Monterrey, Mexico. She walked the Rio Grande and she crossed it in 2 weeks. And so I think that her sacrifice and her ability to keep a smile on her face, regardless of everything, really puts my struggles into perspective. And she used to take me when we didn't have a car. She used to take me on the metro to the Ring Library in Spring Branch in Houston, Texas. So she always instilled that love of literacy and of education. And on my graduation day from my master, she hugged me and she said, "Felicidades, mija, pero no te olvides que comíamos frijoles del week," which means like, congratulations, but don't ever forget that we had, you grew up in like government beans. So she's always given me that ability to rise up and always very quickly pull me back down and keep me grounded. So, te quiero, mami.
Thank you. And I'd just like to mention Virginia, no longer here with me in my life. I cared for her the last couple of years of her life. And what has made her so special in my life was that she embedded, like some of our guests have said, Margarita, Juanita, was this, is education, stay focused, and you can accomplish anything in this country because with your education, everything will get paid for you. And so that's what Virginia always indoctrinated us, and did a great job with that. And so I am very blessed that I had a hardworking, educated woman to be a role model and follow as an educator myself. All right, so next question, Margarita. What motherly advice? Now, all of us bring different backgrounds to education. All of us, everybody here. Okay, so I would like to throw this out there, Margarita. What motherly advice would you give a brand new teacher and a brand new assistant principal?
So I'm not a mom. I am a widow, so I didn't have the opportunity to have a baby, but I was a pre-K teacher for a long time, and so I do consider myself motherly, very motherly, and I'm mom to Blue Tobar, who is my dog. But advice that I give every person entering into education, specifically teachers or someone in a leadership role, is You have to make sure that people, yes, that they like you, but most importantly, that they respect you. It's not your job to go in there and have people feel that you're their friend, more so that you are their leader and you're their educator and that they can trust you. And that is not necessarily built by not having boundaries. So that's advice that my mom always gave me, and that's advice that I always give back to.
Thank you, Jen.
Wow, Margarita, thank you for sharing with that. I think a lot of times the more we get to know someone, the more we're able to kind of relate to what they do have in their backpack, right? We call it kind of like a backpack. And so from the educational arena, a lot of times we're thinking of like the whole child. And right now we are actually actively getting responses from 6th through 12th grade students on what are the most positive indicators when it comes to wanting to be somewhere. When do you want to be home? When do you want to be in a classroom with a particular teacher? And when it comes from like our 6th graders all the way to 12th graders, we're talking about a wide range of student perspectives, right? So any advice for really anybody that's listening, whether it's a home environment, a school environment, your office, if you are an assistant principal, no matter what, you have to pay it forward. So regardless, as they're coming in, we got to think about like, how are we talking to people? Are we listening? Put our cellular devices way to the side, put them on silent. Even when, as a mom, I have a 7th grader and a 9th grader. And when I ask them, hey, what is your favorite part about school from the parent perspective? And their favorite teachers, it's not about the content that they're teaching. It's the way in which they're building relationships, whether it is through something like, hey, I'm so happy to see you. Hey, it's okay. Go ahead. You can borrow a pencil. No problem. If the first thing that kids are hearing, or parents, really anybody, is you have failed to do something, they're going to shut down. And they're not going to listen, and they're going to kind of like tune you out in what you're saying. And so for any advice, like I say, in general, if you're human, it applies. We have to really kind of get to know who it is that we want to help or change for the better, no matter who it is or where we are.
Brandarius.
Well said. Well said. Each of you.
Love it.
Me obviously being a male and not having any biological kids myself. I think the biggest thing is to meet them where they are, kind of like Jennifer expressed.
Yes.
Meet them where they are. Be a listening ear. Listen to understand, not to respond. Build a rapport. Get to know your students. Get to know their living situations. You could better gauge and assess why they do some of the things they do and why they're saying what they're saying. So I've heard so many times just being in youth corrections or dealing with tougher students that they're attention seeking. But often I find out sometimes they just really need somebody to care for them. Not even that they need the attention, they get the attention. They need somebody to pay close attention to them. So I think meeting them where they are and just being genuine and like I said, don't have to even worry about being a friend. Just be firm and be fair. So
Very good.
Love it. Dean Packard.
I'm listening to everybody else here, and I think you've all touched upon nuggets that are important. So, from my perspective, I'd be saying, have them be authentic, be real, be understanding, be empathetic, be compassionate. All those types of things are all tools within us that are going to help guide you to be a better person. And again, even looking through the educational lens, our job, we want them to learn content. There's no doubt about them. But we want them to be problem solvers, risk takers, and also be understanding of people and help understand that people skills will be the number one thing that'll project you in life to get where you want to be. And again, I think there's no stopping when you start thinking about that and what our responsibility is, not only from a parent lens, but also from an education side of things.
Juanita.
Great question. And again, I agree with Mr. Packard here. Everybody's touched on the most important things. And one of the things that I always remember, one of the old quotes that were used before is basically what we're doing today, which is I used to tell teachers, if you win their if you win their heart, you'll win their mind. That was the first advice I would give them. And then I would tell them the same thing I heard, I believe, Brandarius say, which was tough love. In other words, don't be their friend necessarily, because some of them will take it above and beyond and they won't really respect you. So just be careful, to let them know you care, but be tough on them. Expect the best. And another thing I remember is, I always told our teachers, I seem to always work in low socioeconomic schools, and I would tell them, don't let the poverty be the reason for you to be easy on them. Don't even go there, because you know what? I was that child, and my parents had high expectations for me. They always say, go to college, and my teachers the same. And one of the other things that I remember, being a school counselor for 20 years and a bilingual teacher for 10, I remember teachers asking me, Ms. Cantara, what can we do though, like to discipline them and not like make them feel like we're coming down on them hard or disrespecting them? And you know what? Back then there were so many programs like Rachel's Challenge, and I mean just a whole bunch of programs that I could have offered them. And you know what? I'll go into it later if you ask that question. But today I believe, and what I promote a lot is the character education, that it has to start at home. And then teachers do it at school and then out into our community. So that's what I've been teaching. And it's been like getting a lot of attention because of 5 little words of wisdom. And it basically comes down to, it starts at home, Josh. It starts at home and goes out into the schools. Let's do all the same things, support each other, stop blaming each other. And so that's what I would say about a brand new teacher. Now, an assistant principal, you asked something about what would you, tell an assistant principal. Well, I had the best relationship with one assistant principal I'll never forget. And are we allowed to mention names?
Sure.
Okay, well, her name was Diane Flores. Oh my gosh, we had the best relationship. And I believe it was simply because she believed in me. She used to say, oh my God, Juanita, you're like a fireman, firewoman. You put out the fires. And then I would say, what do you mean? And she's like, yeah, before I even tell you I need help with this child, you would already be on top of it. Like, meaning we had that rapport, that trusting, that I've got your back, you've got my back. I remember even like, I don't know how this sounds, but like spoiling her. Like I would see her some days like, ugh, and I would go and I would take her a warm cup of tea in the morning and say, take a deep breath. So it's establishing that I love you, you love me. We're not just here to work together, but we're here because we care about each other as well. So it comes down to social emotional learning for adults as well. That's my feedback on that.
Awesome. And I would just say this, you teacher, new AP, kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. All right. Next question. Jennifer DeGraff, next question. What is the best dish your mom cooked for you? What's the best meal? Jennifer DeGraff.
The best meal that she made was lasagna. And let me just tell you that she got me so hooked on Italian food because in general, we grew up relatively in kind of like that low meal to meal. I mean, I didn't grow up in a high income, even a stable income household. And so when she made lasagna, it was better than Red Lobster. It was better than Olive Garden. It was better than everything. And I can no longer eat out. I can only eat lasagna from home.
Oh, wow. Sounds delicious.
Love it. Margarita?
Yeah, my mom makes the best mole, which is like an Indian chicken tikka masala. And yeah, we only made it when we had enough to buy like meat. So other than that, it was beans and cheese.
Brandarius?
Fried chicken legs, rice and gravy, macaroni and cheese.
Juanita?
I'm laughing, Josh. This is a perfect question. And this is actually in one of my books. Okay. I used to say, in one of the pages, it talks about my mom. And I tell the boys and girls, my mom was a homemaker. She was a baker, music lover. And then I talk to them about, she used to make these tortillas de harina calientitas. Y adentro le ponía frijolitos refritos with chile jalapeño in the middle. And they're all going, So for me, they were refried burrito, bean burritos on freshly made homemade tortillas. That's the truth.
Love it. Dean Packard.
Well, I'm thinking back to being a child, and I loved when my mother would make homemade gołąbkis. Now, a gołąbki is a Polish dish that's cabbage and rice and Hamburg wrapped together, all wrapped in together, and they're really good, and and it's just something that has stuck with me for a long time. And whenever I get to have them, I'm like, great memories right there.
Wow.
My mom's eggplant is the best, and her flan. It's custard. It's the best. No one. Oh, and her buñuelos. They were thin and they would melt in your tongue. They weren't even crunchy. So buñuelos, flan, and eggplant. Kind of weird for a Mexican, but she loved making eggplant. All right. Next question, Dean Packard. What mother of a situation did you once face, either as a teacher or as an administrator, that made you change something that you did?
Walk that backwards one more time. Say that to me one more time, a little slower.
We always get hit with that one moment that makes us change seeing things.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to keep the mother thing here. Go with it, all right?
Okay, yeah,
So,
I'm going with it.
what thing did you face that made you change how you did things?
I'm going to go back and tell you when I first started in administration, my ego was probably bigger than me. And what I mean by that, I think the handbook guided everything that I did. And I forgot at times that we're dealing with people, not widgets. And I think that every situation that I've come across since the first couple of years in administration, I began to look at that differently because we can doesn't mean we always have to do. Because we can gives you the opportunity to dig deeper and see what you're actually dealing with. Does a fight have to be a 10-day suspension because the handbook says it's a 10-day? No, it doesn't. Kids get in fights all the time. You're going to have 100 people out of your school. So I think what you need to think about, and again, going back in time, as I gained confidence in what leadership was supposed to be, I really started thinking about every situation a little bit differently. So I can't pinpoint one specifically. And I can tell you now, after 20 years, I look at things totally differently because kids need to be in school. And we have to find creative, innovative ways to keep them connected to a learning community. And when you don't do that, you create anger, discontention, and you create a very bad vibe and connection with your kids in the schools. So again, I can sit there. There's a lot of things, Josh, and I don't have time to go through all of them. But I think quite frankly, just the relevance of changing who I was came very early in my career.
Jennifer DeGraff?
Gosh, you know what, Dean? It reminded me of from my perspective as well, like everybody comes with a different backpack, right? And I remember during my assistant principal times, we had I was over disciplinary procedures for pretty much the entire 9th through 12th grade scene. And the first thing that one of the first things that I learned, especially from the parent perspective, is when I am going to be communicating with a parent, right, regarding something disciplinary or an incident that had happened with a student, one thing that I learned early on was to call the parent in solo first. Don't have the student sitting there in front of us and then call in the parent and speak to them in front of the student, like at the same time. One of the things I learned was that I want to know, what is our parent going through first before I tell them about what their child is, it's truancy, or they were again in a physical altercation. None of that should matter. The first thing that should matter is, how is the parent doing, and allowing them to kind of let you know, how are things going in the household? How are things going within? What can I do to help? Well, thank you so much for coming in, because now they listen to us a lot better when we show that we care about them, like in the whole perspective. So that was a lesson learned quite early too.
Can you call on me for a second, Josh? One more thing I want to add, Jennifer. Thank you for saying that, because it resonated right to my head. One of the greatest things I like to do also is create buy-in with parents. Because if I'm going to have to discipline a child, like you said, you want that connection and you want them to be involved with the process. All you new administrators out there, if you do it without their consent and their partnership, it's going to be a mess for you. Okay, so help them understand the situation, help them have a voice in what the discipline will be, and you'll see together it'll be a lot better. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to take that back.
Margarita?
I'm going to keep it tied to the mom theme. I think one of the lessons that my mom has taught me, and it recently manifested, was to take risk. And I shared with you guys earlier that she immigrated from Mexico with just, she actually brought two backpacks, but she says that after week one, she was so tired she had to choose between shoes and clothes, and she left the heels somewhere in the desert. So she just moved here with a backpack, and I had the opportunity in August of last year to leave Texas, my home state, and come move here to Colorado and try a new opportunity. And I called her and I said, Mom, I don't think I can go. Like I'm scared and I don't know anyone. And she was like, well, I did that for you for a better life. So you can totally do it, and you can do it with much more than I did. And so I think just taking that leap of faith has changed me. And now I feel limitless. Like now I feel like I can go anywhere.
Wow.
Margarita, I'm sorry, Brandarius.
I think, just to piggyback on what Ms. Jennifer said, asking questions, not necessarily just to the parents, but I know my experience to education is a little bit different. Starting in youth corrections, I'm used to seeing kids being jumped on from a punitive standpoint. But I also remember, being a kid and being told all the time that you don't listen. No one ever asked me why I did what I did. So I found myself sitting down and interviewing kids, and even so much to separate them from the action and then separate them from the consequence so they don't have to keep beating themselves up over it. And what I found was, you would be amazed at, morally what kids think is right and versus wrong. For example, kids is getting in 5 fights a week, they think they're doing an extremely great job if they're getting in 4 fights. So by you jumping on them when they've been raised a certain way, you kind of do a disservice, and they shut down and adopt it. Well, if I'm already in trouble mentality, I might as well go all the way through. So I just kind of sit down with them, continue to lean on meeting them where they are, being firm and being fair and being a listener. So I don't ever have to assume why they did that. I'm gonna ask questions. So I always put it back on them. I'm interviewing them. And then when doing so, you also teach them how to be, able to express and have a reason for everything they do. Because I always tell them, never do anything for no reason. So that's my philosophy. It works for me, and I think it'll work for anyone who will give it an opportunity to work.
Love it. Juanita.
Okay, Josh, when you asked the question, the first thing that came to me was, changing who I was back when I was in school. That's what I got from your question. And amazingly, it's been a long time, but Miss Geisler, I'll never forget her name. She was my middle school English teacher. And what she did, which I think we've gotten away from doing, or maybe teachers still do this a lot, but she used to have on her wall a student of the month board. And I'm back old school, I remember during the day, since I was in middle school, we would change, right, every so often. And I remember students coming up to me and saying, way to go, Juanita. And I would be like, what are they talking about? I didn't know what they were talking about. And then again, during lunch, hey, Juanita, have you gone to Miss Geisler's class? And I'm like, no. Long story short, I end up like wondering the whole day. Once I walked into her room, I couldn't believe it. And even right now, it gives me chills to remember this. Thank you for asking the question. She had all my papers, like everything that I had written, which I didn't give her permission, by the way. I don't even know what they were about, but she would have like hundreds and best work and well written. And so what she did was she highlighted my qualities that I overlooked, obviously, or I didn't believe that I was that great. I thought I was just like everybody else. But when I saw all my papers on the wall, and I think that's what needs to happen. Again, going back to my book, How to Stop Armadillo Tears, that's exactly what it is. It's like it talks about highlighting a person's quality so that others can appreciate them. Because if you don't, then they'll never get to know them. So that's what it reminded me your question of. So thank you for asking it.
And I would just say one mother situation I faced was this quiet young lady, came up to me and said, "What? You would be better if you smile more." Oh,
Sass.
yeah. So I try now. All right, I try. Doesn't happen that much, but I remember her telling me that. That was from the corazón,
Yeah.
from the heart. She told me that. All right, here we go. Next advice. Next up. What piece of advice did your mom give you that you cherish still today? I know they give us tons, 10 million, but once the one that hits you right in your corazón. Juanita.
Mm. Hijo, you had to ask me first, right? Because this is what comes to mind. She used to call me su hija la millonaria. And I asked her once, why do you call me your daughter the millionaire? And she said, because you believed everything I told you. You know, you could be an abogada, a lawyer, mija, because nunca te gano. You always talk and talk and talk, and you always never lose. You know, you've always had that in you. And I'm like, okay, but why millonaria? And she says, because you believed in your dreams and you always followed them. And one of the things that I always used to tell her was, you know, Mom, I want to have somebody in my house. And I don't know how this sounds, but it's a true story, to help me clean, to do everything for me, like living the rich life without really being rich, Mom. But that's what I want. And then she said, pues ve al colegio, go to college, pues. You want that? You can have it. So I believed her. And guess what? I did have it. And right now, she's 76 years old. She lives with me still. My kids are away, emptiness syndrome. But now she's their second mom. And today was a beautiful day because they called us both to wish us a happy Mother's Day. And my son, right now, the youngest, is in Qatar. And it was sort of kind of emotional because I heard her telling him, or him telling her, I love you, Maggie, I love you, and I miss you, and this and that. And I go, oh no. And then I was in the background, no, I love you more. I'm your real mother. You know, so that's what it reminds me of my madrecita, who always again believed in me and always told me that I can do whatever I wanted to do and have. And so you can. You really can.
Brandarius.
Yep.
Just to go back to what I shared earlier, my mom was a firm believer in make your bed, you lay in it. So if you want a comfortable bed, you go out there and do the things that'll make your life comfortable. If you want to be uncomfortable, go be a knucklehead. And you know, kind of similar to also a message that one of my high school counselors gave me when I was ineligible, going into my sophomore year. And I remember I cried in the office, and he said, "You didn't cry when you were getting in trouble, so don't cry now." And I always say, you know, between him and my mother telling me about making my bed, I say it never made me perfect, but it made me 100% accountable for any and everything that I've done and will do. So that's been the greatest advice to me. And I extend that message to every person that I come in contact with by telling them, hey, I can be accountable to you, but I can't and won't be accountable for you. So whatever you choose to do, lay in your bed.
Yep.
Dean Packard.
I think it's pretty simple. Be humble, my son. Be humble. Be humble. Because a lot of things are going to happen within your life. And then if you take them the way you should take them, you'll continue to grow. If you take them in any other capacity, it can lead you down a path that you're not going to be very happy with.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer.
You know what? I think the reason that the emotional piece comes to play is for a lot of people that, again, it reminds me of, it's not about my name or, you know, my title or my history, but my mom to this day has really taught me about the importance of prioritizing you. Now, when I think about it from that, a lot of people, there's certain people that'll say, well, if I focus on self-care and self-management and knowing what I love and what I don't love, then I feel like I'm being selfish. But honestly, she taught us very certain skills when it comes to prioritizing who is number one. We have to look in the mirror, because if I'm good, my kids are going to be good. if I'm not good, my kids are not going to be good. And so I tell people all the time that we really need to stop thinking about, my husband, my wife, my mom, my dad. We got to first prioritize that reflection in the mirror, because if we do, people around us will feel it. If we don't, people around us will feel it. And so we always want to push that. My mom taught us early on that if we really focus on what we need, love, want, need to overcome trauma, if we focus on that first, other people will prosper.
True.
Margarita?
Yeah, my mom had this quote that always stuck with me, and it said, law and justice are different things. And so she used to like reading a lot of like different books, and I remember her explaining to me one time, this is what the law says, but that doesn't mean that it's always fair or that it's justice for all. And anything that you do, you must remember that even though sometimes, because I'm such a rule follower, so she would be like, even though you're following the rule, is that really good for you? And now that I am chief talent officer, I get to decide all of these things, and sometimes enforce the law, I always think, am I enforcing the law, but is that justice to that person? So yeah, I think she was very wise, and I appreciate that advice.
That's awesome.
Love it, love it. And for me, it's a drawing my mom shared right when I was leaving the Marines, or to the Marines, and I've shared it with the majority of my students as part of my Facebook. It's the frog choking the crane, and it says, never give up.
Never give up.
Never give up. So next question. Brandarius, at work or around you, have you ever had somebody else be a motherly figure to you? And who was that?
Oh yeah, 100%. My mom laughed about it. I call everybody moms, Madus. So if you present to me as someone that's like a mother, automatically I'm like, hey, Madus. And I think it goes to a lot of the qualities. Like, if I feel like you're caring, you're open, you're compassionate, you're empathetic. Like you said earlier, kids don't care, what you know until they know how much you care. Even as adults, I think we still need those 5 basic needs. So whenever I feel that, I always try to make sure I give that appreciation. Like Margarita said, some people were not fortunate to have kids, but they're fortunate to have that loving charisma, and I always try to highlight it. Even this morning, there's a principal a professor at UNLV here in Las Vegas that came to a couple of my events, and that's put me in front of her classes 3 times this semester, which turned into interns for my organization. And I said this morning, hey, Miss Jenny, I'm not sure if you have biological kids. Happy Mother's Day if you do, and Happy Mother's Day if you don't, because I can only imagine the love you give your students. And she was like, that's so sweet. Thank you. I do have kids, but that's kind of how I look at it. And, after losing my grandmother, I'll be in the grocery store and I see someone that may need some help. Hey, Grandma, I got that for you. So that's kind of how I am.
Love it. Dean Packard.
I'm glad, Brandarius, you talked about your grandmother, and I'm going to go down that road as well. My grandmother lived next door to us growing up, and the lessons that she taught me as I was growing up, I don't want to say that my parents and my mother didn't do a great job in that capacity, but someone who was older and wiser and helped me see what was inside of myself. And even when I was making mistakes, to be able to help me recognize my mistakes by still giving me a squeeze and a hug afterwards and telling me how special I was to her, and all the way up until she was in her 90s. And I remember, and I would sit by her bedside and we'd talk, and she'd bring back old memories. And to me, the circle of life revolves all around that family aspect of those people in your world that make you think a little bit differently. So yeah, Grandma, if you're listening up there, absolutely, this is why we do what we do, and we spread those seeds everywhere we can.
Margarita?
Yeah, I think, sometimes when I started going to therapy as an adult, I unpacked a lot of things that I feel could have been better in terms of how my parents parented me. And in talking with my mom, one of the things that I shared with her was that often because she never hung my artwork in the fridge, or because she never was like, wow, this is amazing, I always felt that I wasn't good enough, and I always wanted to do more. And so she was like, absolutely not. It's the opposite. I always thought you were amazing. That's why I always felt that I could push you because you could. And I found that same type of love and encouragement in one of my mentors early in my career. Her name is Sandra Menjuero. And I experienced the same type of relationship with her. Always felt that I was never good enough, a never good enough teacher, but she made me an assistant principal at 25, encouraged me to be one of the youngest principals at 27 in Houston. And to this day, she's always sending me pictures like, wow, I'm so proud of you, but you're not done yet. And so I do think that I appreciate that push and that love. And I have found it in other people too.
Jennifer.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, as I continue hearing now, I mean, when this is all, said and done, I still am going to want all of your cell phone numbers. That way we can kind of continue the connection because we have so much in common. So my first year teaching, I was teaching in 79901, which is right on I could literally walk outside of my classroom and I'd be able to see just the beauty of Ciudad Juarez, which again is near and dear to my heart forever and ever. So my first year teaching, I remember all I needed to do was survive, because I mean, yes, I had a degree and yes, I passed all my exams. I mean, but I went in every single day having to replan my lesson plan because it never went exactly as planned. And at that time, I had an assistant principal who I already know her. She would not want to be named because she says all the time, stop giving me credit. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll tell you what. She took me really under her wing as a mom. And not only did she have very high standards, she also had very sideline acknowledgement. I don't need a certificate. I don't need a golden star. I don't even need a pay raise. But when she would tell me things like, hey, Jen, by the way, I was walking by your classroom the other day and I heard you teaching and you were doing A and B, she just had to tell me. And it motivated me because the very next day she would always start with something positive, but then she would add in, next time, maybe you should try A or B or C. And so I automatically always wanted her. She's my mom. And by my third year teaching, I was teacher of the year. And I'll tell you what, it had very little to do with my degree. It had everything to do with that support from the administrative side and not making like those walkthroughs a matter of, oh, you didn't meet this T-test or you didn't meet this particular objective. No, start with the good. And then I'm going to perform for you better. If you just start with what you liked and what I did well, I'll be able to I'll meet that high expectation.
Juanita.
Oh gosh, that one's easy. Again, I'll mention her name now. That older lady that's 76 years old who still lives with me. Now I refer to her as my aunt because I feel weird introducing her as my children's nana, or she's become a family member. And when I lost my mom, especially recently, even before then, I think she always thought she was my mom too, because when I went through a divorce, I remember her saying, Juanita, what do you want to do now? And I said, I want to be a school counselor. And she goes, why don't you? And I said, well, because who's going to take care of my kids? Like, I can't do it by myself. And I wanted to go to Sol Ross. And she goes, yo se los cuido. So she gave me that moral support, physical support, right? She took care of them without expecting anything in return. And I always said that I am who I am today because of my parents' sacrifices. But this lady has been a blessing in my life. And the second answer to that, and her name is Margarita Hernandez Reyes. And I want that to be noted because she's going to be tickled pink when she hears this. But the second two also will be tickled pink are my older sisters. They still call me mi hermanita, my little sister, especially my older sister, Blanca Gallegos, and my middle sister, Sylvia Gallardo. They're always telling me the way it is, so they always appear to be like my mother, even though I'm a grown woman, but they too have really taken the place of being my mothers too.
Awesome. Dean Packard,
Yes,
what
sir.
is the most precious moment you shared with your mom? I know there's 10 million, but which one comes to light?
Most precious. Um, Phew, my God, man, you're killing me with this one. You should have given me this question ahead of time. So I'm going to forget something at the age of man. Most precious moment that I shared, you know, uh, probably, and it's probably one of those a multiple thing. You know, we had so many talks growing up that the talks were small things of importance in my life at the time, but they added up to a big roadmap for me to be successful as a young man. So, any one particular thing I couldn't tell you, Josh, and I don't think it's fair for me to put one thing on the table right now because I think it's all about a journey.
Yeah.
All right, Brandarius.
I'll go with the most recent moment I had with my mother. This past Thursday, I put my first cohort of students through my program, and my mom came, and she, we started off with a check-in and check-out from 0 to 10, 0 being the worst, 10 being the best. And when I just got to sit back and listen to my mom talk about me in a perspective other than being her young bad son, it was so amazing to hear her see me as the man and mentor I am now to my community. Because we had never had that conversation about what I'm doing. They hear bits and pieces of it, but to see her in that moment expressing the way she feel, I'm like, man, this is where I get my abilities to speak from, my abilities to care and be concerning. So that was like, I still didn't even tell her, but I'm like, that's amazing. Another one I'll share. We took a trip to California in February, and my mom's listened to Gerald Levert. I'm sure you all know who Gerald Levert is. I listen to rap, but this song was. I'm thinking like, wow, here it is. My mom is putting me on some R&B that make me want to grow a little bit more, be a little bit more gentle when it comes to interacting with women. And I took that song and I told my mom the other day on an Instagram post. I said, this is a reminder for you to smile, and I give my mom this credit for this song. So it's like I'm finding so many things now that my mom just do that means so much more to me now as a man that I would have refused as a kid. Like, mom, not soft, but now it's like, okay, you don't have to be always so firm. Be loving and caring. So thank you, mom, for that.
Juanita.
Oh gosh, that's a hard one, Josh. But I'm gonna just say it. The most precious moment, I guess, for me is when you were working and working and working and working. I remember seeing your pictures with your mamacita, and when you used to go visit her. Well, I was doing the same thing with mine, right? But never did I think that the most precious moment for me was when I retired. That I realized I had a lot more time on my hands. Thankfully. And so the most precious moment for me was when she was very ill in her bed. I remember being able to tell her what I always wanted to tell her, which was, Madrecita, thank you so very much for all your sacrifices. And I just want you to know, that kind of talk. And if I keep talking, I'll cry, so I won't. But basically, she, and I were able to, she heard me. She heard that her sacrifices were the reason why I am who I am today. So to me, that was very precious. And another one was when I would visit her, she would love for me to do her nails. And when I got there, I never said I was going to agree to do everybody else's nails, but she would always, there you go, yeah, you go, me, yeah, get it. So that was precious too. So those two memories I remember.
Jennifer.
You know what? As soon as you said that, like Dean, like I'm with you. Like, I mean, there are so many different things, at our age. I think I'm probably just a little bit older than you, Dean, but I'm just saying, that have really changed. But that one thing that changed the entire eternity, I know Josh is like, yeah, no. I was 20 years old and I could not wait to have my own apartment. And so at 20 years old, I had a 3-year-old a son that, I mean, he changed my whole life. But anyway, and I couldn't wait to have my own apartment. And so my mom, she's like, of course, baby, I will help you move into your new apartment. And she got me like my own little dishes and whatnot. And after I was gone out of the household for about, I'm going to go ahead and say 6 weeks, I told Mom, I said, Mom, like my life is not the same without you. Like, I don't know if I can do this. And she told me, baby, she says, sometimes you don't learn the lesson until you live it. And let me just tell you, when that 6-month lease was up, I forced her to buy 5 acres next to me. And now I have lived next to her for the last, maybe 20 years, because she has 5 acres over there. I have 5 acres right here. And so I got to be rewarded. So anyway, I get to be by my mom every day.
Lucky you. Awesome.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in pain, right? And I think that the most beautiful moments that I've shared with my mom have been when we've gone through very painful things together. And I know for a fact that our relationship changed when I became a widow, like I shared earlier. I think that just having that concept that time is the only thing we can't buy, and that we won't all be here forever. We didn't used to say I love you after every call, and now we do. And so I think that every time that I talk to her on the phone and tell her te quiero mami, bye, buenas noches, I think I cherish that. So that's the most beautiful moments that I share with her.
Awesome. And for me, it's one of those things that I did not have a great relationship with my mom. I didn't. On the contrary, it was the opposite. And the most precious moment for me was after she got ill, she bled in the brain. I had to care for her for years. We had on her lucid time, we fixed things. And it's one of those things that till you're there, you understand what I just said. And when you fix things, and Margarita, I feel you, what you just said about how we're raised as Hispanics sometimes, and then we have a different philosophy and we clash with that. That's part of the things that we had as a family member. But for me, the most precious moment was that we apologized to each other and we had each other's back, and we knew all along we had it, but we just didn't have a way of how to communicate that as a mother and a son. And in closing, Dean Packard, in closing.
Hey, I want to say something. Out of all the mothers out there, the mothers are the glue to the family, and I'm not taking away from dads. I'm just not. Okay.
We got a dad show.
Moms, and again, we got a Father's Day show coming up too, but I'm going to be real here. A mother's job is never done. It's just never, ever, ever done. And if a mother that keeps the family at the forefront of what they do is that mother that's worth their weight in stone. There's no doubt about it, because they will keep people together through thick and thin. Otherwise, families disintegrate. They just do. And what happens then, they become ours in schools. And in schools, we have to deal with anger. We have to deal with separation. We have to deal with identity, all these types of things. So for all you mothers out there, thank you so much for doing the job you do each and every day. You don't get enough credit. God, I wish you could get a paycheck for being a great mom, because if you could and get paid for it, that'd be fantastic.
Awesome.
I don't know what else to say, Josh.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We appreciate you on the Mother Day show. We had some motherly advice, education advice, everything from the cornerstone of our lives, our mamas. And soon we'll have that other part, the dad that comes in June. So join us for that dad show. But you know what, Dean? It's not over. Dean, it's not over. This Thursday. What do we have this Thursday, Dean?
What do we have? It's not office hours. What is it? It's Inside the Red Zone, Josh. I know
Red Zone. Special topic, school board members from around the country joining us for the Red Zone, 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We love you. We care about you. And go give your mama a big hug and kiss. Peace.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Guys, great to have all.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Listen, have a great week, everybody. Juanita, Jennifer, Margarita, and Brandarius, and Josh. Thank you so much. Have a great week, everybody, and thanks for sharing. Happy Mother's Day to everybody out there. Enjoy.
Bye, guys.
Bye, you all. Very nice.